Hey y'all, welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Colton, here with Brandon. We've got some news and updates on the English Weiss front this week, and let's get into it. First, we want to talk about the Mushoku Tensei release tournament that will be hosted by Bushiroad on the Remote Fight Discord server. 64-player tournament taking place on April 23rd. Check-in starts at 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 12:30 p.m. Pacific. Unlike the title cups of the past, however, you can use any English set. You do not need to play Mushoku Tensei for this tournament. So I think they saw what happened with the SDS title cup back several months ago now. They made the appropriate change, and now they're going to let people play whatever they want, basically more as a celebration of the release of Mushoku Tensei and a way to kind of push that release a little bit instead of limiting players to only Mushoku Tensei.
The big combo that was leading up into that was going to be that Meliodas combo with like the reflect damage on your opponent's turn. So it's going to be like a stall at the top. Whatever deck was being played needed to be able to remove that effect in some way. And so the decks that had that did really well. So seeing with Mushoku Tensei adding in people to be able to play with other decks, I think forces it to see a better listing of Mushoku Tensei instead of a Mushoku Tensei list designed to only play against Mushoku Tensei.
So yeah, that tournament will be April 23rd. The rules are the normal online Bushiroad Discord tournament rules. Same rules apply to sleeves and mats as well. Only 64 players get in, and then there's a waiting list. Honestly, don't know if there are spots available still, but we will put a link to the page on the Weiss website in the description. You can click that. Registration details are there. The rules are there, etc. There will be prize support, although I don't think they have announced what that's going to be yet.
No, they've only announced that the person that wins, if they play with Mushoku Tensei, there's like a special prize in addition to that.
So yeah, it'll be presumably a showcase for Mushoku Tensei. I expect a lot of MTI to be played, just because it is the MTI themed event, but play whatever you want. This is also a really good, more casual event. Not as high of stakes. This isn't a Springfest. This isn't a Rumble. I like these events. I think these events are really good. It gives us just another thing on the calendar to look forward to, another way to check the meta, a way to see the new stuff from the new set, and an opportunity to play cards. So that tournament will take place on Saturday, April 23rd on the Bushiroad Remote Fight Discord server. Again, link in the description to everything that you need. So moving on from tournament announcements, on to the release schedule. We expected this. Quintuplets 2 is coming to English. It will come out August 12th. What we didn't expect was that it's going to come out before the AOT3 release at the end of August. So Bushiroad kind of squeezing Quintuplets in between AOT and Tokyo Revengers. That could potentially open up a ton of space at the end of the calendar in 2022 for new sets. We'll talk about that in a second. The other key announcement, we are getting reprints for both AOT 1 and AOT 2 ahead of the AOT 3 release. This is categorically a good thing.
Yeah, being able to give players access to older cards. If the set is traded with the old core trait, this opens up potential for more players to be able to buy into those old products.
Yeah, and we still don't know what the traits are going to be yet. We know the PR cards that we've seen have the core trait, but we haven't seen anything from the booster packs yet. I don't know if the old AOT stuff is still super viable, but it's still obviously at least pretty good. So if you wanted to build the old AOT list, you will now have the opportunity to not spend an arm and a leg to do so, because these reprints are doubtlessly going to bring down the value of the key expensive pieces. I know the Aaron combo was $50-$60 a card or something ridiculous. So that's going to help bring that cost into a much more reasonable range and hopefully make those cards more accessible for people. And the reprints of AOT 1 and 2 are going to be opened quite a bit because there will be SP chasers. SP's going to be reprinted in these two sets, I believe exactly the same as they were in AOT 1 and AOT 2. Same printing, same foiling, all that is going to be functionally exactly the same, so they're going to be more or less indistinguishable. So the prices for base rarity AOT 1 and 2 from the reprint are probably going to be significantly lower, just because so much product's going to get opened. Same with AOT 3, shouldn't be particularly expensive because of all the product that's going to be opened. I'm hopeful that aside from maybe a handful of chase cards, maybe the stuff from the old AOT list keeps, some of its value just because name recognition and, it is, an important combo, etc. I'm hopeful that new players will have the opportunity to buy into AOT and play high-level AOT without breaking the bank.
So, because Quince is now scheduled to come out before Attack on Titan final season, we now have basically September forward of kind of left open, right? If we even just assume one set per month, which don't think is super unreasonable here, we have 4 months left in 2022. So potential 4 slots. With that in mind, AOT kind of being that mid-year-ish English release for English exclusive, we still have that potential for another English exclusive in the winter time. And then 3 other slots that are generically open as to what those set products could be.
Yeah, and I think that we kind of know what's coming in early 2023, right? Like Kaguya 2, Data Live 2, the Quintuplets movie set, all will probably drop in early 2023. Probably somewhere between January and April, right? So there's a window of time before the stuff that we are almost definitely getting, and after the stuff that has been announced, where we just don't know.
One of those sets that we're looking at specifically is the premium booster from HoloLive. It's supposed to release in June, after being sold at the expo earlier this year. Mm-hmm. Like that's its like release date for JP. So with it being the June 3rd, that usual like 6-month range that we would like expect, that delay of 6 months to come into English, would put that in December.
Yeah.
Which is about the same time we expect the English original. So it makes me wonder if we're going to get it this year or the beginning of next year.
Right.
That 6-month timeline, I'm leaning towards we'll see it this year, especially if HoloLive does as well as we expect it to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, shoot. Calliope Mori just hit 2 million subscribers, only the third HoloLive VTuber to do so. And one of the other two is literally Gura. So English HoloLive has been very popular just as a product. So I anticipate that the English release of HoloLive products is going to be very popular as well. And that leads me to speculate that the EN original could be specifically English HoloLive. I don't know how licensing works, so I'm not going to put too many eggs in this basket, but it seems like it makes sense. Like, we have the HoloLive Premium Booster, if that comes out, like, say, in December or January, and then the EN original that comes out in, let's say it happens in December or maybe next January, the same way that the AOT release kind of got delayed. I think it would make sense for those back-to-back releases to both be HoloLive, because you can kind of keep that hype going. The Premium Booster does feature some English characters. So, I don't know. I think that that's a possibility. I'm certainly not going to predict it necessarily, but it's something I'm keeping an eye on.
For that kind of wild speculation, I think that's actually a really interesting one. Because we now have precedent for something like that. We now have AOT Final Season, which is a essentially sequel set of stuff that's already been printed, coming out as an English original. Seeing that done with HoloLive, especially if it sells well initially, there's now precedent for it. So like that could be a thing. I mean, clearly at this point we don't know, right? We don't have any announcements. The Quince 2 announcement was kind of like, oh, yeah, we're releasing these Quince packs. Oh, by the way, I guess we are releasing Quince as well. Announcement of Quince felt more like an afterthought versus anything else. So like we don't really have any real like announcements in place, nor do we have any scheduled. So it's like
we don't have a product stream for English on the calendar yet. So I think we both kind of anticipate that will happen at some point, but as of right now, we don't know. So, the schedule remains kind of as is, but we have the dates for Camelot, Danmachi, Tokyo Revengers, now Quintuplets 2, and AOT 3. Going forward, what happens next? We have this big window. I feel really confident that we're going to get Hololive Premium Booster. We got the Bang Dream Premium Booster. I think we're going to get this one. And I think we're going to get some kind of EN Original. But that gives us 2, maybe 3 sets from September to November that we just don't know about. And I think that there's a lot on the table. I think we're looking at Princess Connect being really viable still. I know we've talked about this before, right? We've talked about all of these before. Princess Connect is really viable. Zombieland Saga has a real chance. World Trigger, The Day I Became a God. We've talked about how we don't think it's going to be Dragon Maid because it's JP manga art as opposed to anime art. But who knows? Maybe they could do like an art change for the release. I don't know. Like they did release that game in the English market earlier this year. The only thing I feel really confident in is that we're not getting Cars.
There's a lot of like different options that they could bring over, but there's nothing like screaming like this is a guarantee. This is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
the only set that was like that was Quints 2, and now that that's been announced, it's absolute crapshoot. So who knows? They could announce something completely off the beaten path. We could get something that's just like I wasn't expecting we were going to get Data Live either. We could just get Saikano. They could just really mess with us and give us something else like that. So who knows? Lot on the table, and we will see if we get really disappointed by the release of something uninteresting. But hopefully we won't. Moving on from that, there's one other thing we wanted to talk about today, and that's the community tier list. This comes out every quarter or so. Kilua runs this, gets it put together. Appreciate all the work that he does to make this happen. Let's have a look at that tier list. So this tier list was going to respond to 3 different things. One was the announcement of new sets, MTI in particular. Second was Rumble and how decks performed at that tournament. And third was going to be the ban list. So obviously a lot of things to shake up the tier list this time. And I think you and I are in agreement that we're kind of on the same page with the community at large. A lot of this looks about like how we would stack things up right now.
I definitely think that the sets are closer than what the tiers would seem to be. There's not a lot of difference, I think, in between, like, say, tier 2 and tier 3. I think those are very, very close together kind of thing. I think that the top 4 are definitely still in, like, the top rankings of stuff. I would put Slime further down, Colton. I don't trust Slime. I also think Kage is a little high. Personally, I would put MTI in tier 1. I think it's still, like, the top of tier 1, but I think putting it on its own tier, I think is a bit of, like, a community expectation of it versus having a chance to be able to perform to that level yet. There's definitely a lot that it has going for it and a lot of tools to, like, put it in that area. But it has almost a full 10-point spread from the next set down in the ratings, which seems excessive in just like how different that is. But I think that also might speak to how people rate everything else currently in that range.
8 Standby MTI scored 93 on the survey, about 93 and a half. 8 Standby Slime scored almost 84, so there's like a 9.5 point gap there. I think that is completely appropriate. This is where I think I'm going to disagree with you. I think Mushoku Tensei is 100% far and away tier 0. Like, I don't think there's anything that is better than it, and I don't think there's a whole lot that plays well into it. And now that Data Live has been nerfed, there isn't really anything to challenge MTI at that level. Slime almost gets there, but Slime has too many consistency issues. It's less likely to maintain compression. It just doesn't have the tools to fix its deck state if things start to go off the rails, whereas MTI has a whole lot more pieces to handle that. So I would 100% put MTI on its own tier. All that said, I still think that Slime is really good. It's still really big, wins a lot of board, forces opponents to lose their resources in the mid-game in order to keep up. Still very high caliber. Obviously, there's a reason why it won one of the tournaments at Rumble. just has a couple of flaws that keep it, I think, a tier below Mushoku Tensei. As far as the other Mushoku Tensei build is concerned, there's still a lot of unknowns. Obviously, it's a 1k1 going into a standby heavy meta, but MTI has some pieces that make it look like it could be a little different. We thought something similar kind of with 8 choice slime and 8 choice stayed alive. That didn't really pan out. I think 1k1 MTI brings a little more to the table, and I think it can make a stronger push toward being top tier. Kaguya, I agree, it's overrated here. It did fine at Rumble, but then after doing fine at Rumble, it lost a lot of its key level 0 plussing. It didn't feel like it was quite there to me before the ban, and now post ban, I think it drops into that big tier 2/tier 3 group of decks that are playable and decent, but not quite top tier. So I think we're looking still at a very standby heavy meta. I do agree with you, however, that I don't see a ton of difference between tiers 2 and 3. I think a lot of that is kind of loose and dependent on individual matchups.
I would also throw 8 Standby Dal into that bubble.
Oh yeah, 100%. I do think that 8 Standby Dal on tier 4 is a little low. Like, 8 Standby Dal is definitely better than Konosuba, and it's definitely better than Sword Art. As much as Data Live doesn't have access to the stuff that makes it broken anymore, it's still 8 Standby. Like, vanilla 8 Standby is still better than vanilla 1k1, which is functionally what Konosuba and Sword Art are. For now, I think that, like, Dal is still probably in that third tier. We'll obviously have to see how it performs at a tournament to really get a good look at, how far the mighty have fallen, but it's still present. I also think that this might give the other 2 Dal lists on here, the 8 choice and the choice standby Dal lists, a chance to maybe push and become the primary Dal lists. We'll see. I think both of those can make a push into tier 2, depending on how they do in competition. I like seeing Ruby mentioned quite a bit. I definitely think the 8 standby list is still my favorite, but I think the fact that Ruby has a mention in tier 2, I think that's well deserved. It performed quite well at Rumble, and I think that it is worth slotting decently high. I think the same thing about Love Live Sunshine. It doesn't show up very often, but when it does what Love Live Sunshine does. It's the most dangerous top end maybe in all of Weiss right now. Love Live Sunshine is still very much a thing. Will continue to be a thing until it gets hit by the ban list, which I hope does not happen, but we'll see. But yeah, I see a whole lot of standby triggers at the top.
Another part I think is really interesting here is how highly Quintuplets is rated, especially with some of the results that we saw from previous things. I think that Quintuplets, especially we saw, for example, from Rumble, Quintuplets here is, I think, one of the sets that also highlights the difference now. Right, with Dal being hit, the increase of sets and potential of sets that Dal kind of boxed out being brought in. I think Quintuplets here is one of those sets that highlight some of those things. The increase in status as opposed to what it could have been. Because this is Quints before Quints 2 comes out, right?
Right.
So, Quints 2 is going to help change the game in some way as well, because we're going to see another 8 standby list come through.
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of brought back up to the front again. But seeing the bar choice listed as high as it is on this tier list, I think it's just an example of some of the other things that we see. We've seen 8 bar Fate, for example, back up into tier 3 as opposed to even lower than that.
I don't think it was Data Live that gave Quintuplets so much trouble as much as it was just the fact that it was a massive standby board that, made Quints bleed hand because it couldn't win board in the mid game. So I don't think Quintuplets is going to get better now that MTI is the top dog. It's still going to have to play into Slime, still going to have to play into Ruby, and it's going to struggle in all those matchups. And it's still going to struggle against Dal, too. The small 1k1 decks are still going to struggle against Data Live. I think the most interesting climb here is from stuff like Fate and Konosuba, specifically 8 bar and the salvage level 1 combo in Konosuba. Those things were more or less completely cut out by the presence of both the Shido and the My Little Shido event at level 1. Both of those things can really affect those. Neither of them got hit by the Dal ban list. But with 8 standby Dal, which ran usually 3 copies of the Shido Blink, which could be used pretty easily to just get rid of the Neg Soul top end or get rid of the Megumin Oboro combo, or make it so that those effects didn't go off and those decks didn't get their pluses. If Data Live's representation does drop because of this, I think that Konosuba and 8-Bar Fate are a little less scared of the Blink, because there will be fewer things that have access to, or at the very least fewer things that play the Blink. So we might see those start to climb a little bit, just because the big thing that denied their advantage might not be as present. And we're still going to see a ton of other Dal, right? We're still going to see 8-choice Dal. We're still going to see choice standby Dal. It's still going to be present enough that I don't think that Fate and Konosuba rise too far. But if Dal's representation goes from 30% down to 15%, and you are an 8-Bar Fate player, you're a little less scared now, because there are fewer decks in a tournament that feature the Blink pieces that can really shut down your top end. One of the things I'm going to be keeping my eye on at Springfest will be Dal's representation, how much Dal gets played, because a lot of people still own it, a lot of people are still going to try to be on it, and I think a lot of people are going to shift to the choice list or the choice standby list. But again, we will see. Obviously, a lot of other things that are interesting here. Sword Art's 8 Wind is still present. Bofuri, the anti-standby Bofuri, is the only Bofuri on this list. Obviously, it won a tournament, so it's going to get love for sure. I think that the community kind of has, now that they've been through the Dal era, I think that the community at large knows what to look for when it comes to, new broken standby, and I think that they are accurately seeing Mushoku Tensei as, a very similar power level to Data Live in terms of its position in the meta.
With Springfest starting up this week in some areas, we're looking forward to seeing what some of those numbers come back with and what some of those representations are. So we're going to try to keep an eye on that as that happens.
And with that, that's all that we have. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back on Thursday with 5 cards, 5 minutes for Mushoku Tensei. Rares and double rares. Get a look at some of those key cards. The following week, Brandon will have a Deck Tech 4 post-ban list Dal. See if we can't make 8 standby still viable in a post-ban list world, and we will have gameplay for that the following Thursday. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and have a good one.
We'll see you then.